I'm on a unicorn in Spain, just for the fun, and because there was this very big unicorn. So I come from Belgium. It's not my first PyCon island. I love to travel a lot in Europe, in the world, for example, PyCon US, EuroPython, whatever, etc., etc. And I'm a contributor of Python, just that. Organizer of EuroPython, a small organizer. Sorry, there is a problem with the microphone. And I create the Python FOSDEM in Belgium, where we are 800 people just for free. You need to pay your beers, your hotel, and your food, of course. But the rest is just free. So, what's new in Python 3.7? Firstly, the new syntax. Yeah, we dropped the intelligent and really easy syntax, and we prefer Java. Okay? No, really. Sorry. That was just a joke. We moved to Perl. We prefer this. No, really. Okay. For Python 3.7, we have some PEPs. PEP is just for the enhancements of Python. And we have a lot of PEPs in this case. Firstly, the best and maybe the more interesting thing is just the breakpoint feature. Breakpoint feature is really interesting for the newcomers. For example, we have a code here. And we have a problem with this code because we can have a crash like that. Sometimes we could use some useful tools like, for example, just the print function or the debugger. The print function is there, and the debugger. I'm the programmer, I'm going to use a debugger. I'm a newbie, I'm going to use a print and the logging and the debugger sometimes. So, for the breakpoint feature, there was another keyword, breakpoint, debugger, just here. But this keyword comes from JavaScript, and we don't like JavaScript. Sorry. We don't like Perl. No, just kidding. I like to use JavaScript, but not Perl. So, we have the choice. When we start to debug with Python, we have some debuggers. I use PDB, I used in the past IPDB, I used PUDB and PDBPP, and etc., etc., etc. But when you want to start with Python, you have one question. Which debugger I can use? For me, I'm going to use the debugger of PyCharm, of PDB, or in this case, PDBPP. Okay, but you're a newcomer, and you don't know that. You can use PDB and PDB set trace, for example. That's the main recipe that you can find on the internet. And of course, in the main documentation of Python. Or you can use your favorite debugger with PUDB set trace. Okay? Is that fine for you? Yeah. And now, with Python 3.7, we have added a new function, a built-in function, just breakpoint. We want to add a breakpoint, just add breakpoint, the command line. And now, when you will execute the script, automatically you will get the PDB set trace function from the PDB module, just there. Automatically, when you will start your script, you will get this prompt, and you can start to debug. You can start your debugging session. Okay? So, we have the capabilities to configure the breakpoint built-in function with some variables. For example, on the command line, you can define breakpoints, Python breakpoints is equal to 0. This value will disable the breakpoint, the debugger. Okay? If you use an empty string, Python will use PDB by default. If you set another value, PUDB set trace, we will use PUDB. And if you like IPython, you can use IPython. Okay? Any question? No. So, and if you like to use your browser for the debugging, you can use WebPDB, example. If you prefer to use your browser for the debugging session, that's good. We have a solution for that. Okay, next point. I'm just happy with this feature. Sorry. I think that was the best feature in Python 3.7. For the trainees, not for me, for the trainees. Okay, about a new feature is just the data classes. Who know the data classes? Wow, 3 people, 5. Wow. So, I'm going to explain what is the data class. When you want to start the development of a new feature in your software, or for example, a person or an entity, you can use the name tuple, the tuple, or the dictionary, or another solution, the Python classes. Okay? For example, I have the person. I would like to represent a person. I'm going to use the tuple. I can do that with that person. There's no problem. I have the person here, but there is a problem. I don't know if with the number 0, I'm going to use the first name or the last name. Okay? I have a problem with that. Okay, I'm going to use the dict. For the dict, I have the same problem. I can use the first name, but I don't have the dot notation. I would like to use the dot notation because I'm using a programming language where the object is just a master rule. We could use the name tuple. With the name tuple, I'm going to define just a new class, person, with these attributes, first name and last name. And of course, I'm going to get a new class just here, and I can access to the first name attribute. Of course, with the name tuple, I can execute the equality operator. It's not very difficult for us and for the newcomer. Or we could use the class. You know that, for example, in Java, you have 2 attributes. You have the setter and the getter. With Python, we can do the same thing. Okay? But we can do the same thing with the data classes. We get the same result with few lines. Okay? Just here, we import data class from the data classes module and just use the typewriting for the attributes of my class. In this case, first name and last name. And the data class of decorator, we create for me a constructor, the init function. Okay? Do you prefer this version or that one? So, you can tell me, do you prefer this one? And that one? Yes? Okay, thank you. Welcome to this new feature. Okay, and now, of course, because we have the name tuple function from the name tuple, we can create a new data class with make data class. Just give the name for the class and the attributes. But in this case, we don't have the typewriting. But we will get the same result like the name tuple. I don't like it, but that's really useful. For the rest, we can define some default values for the data classes. Okay? In this case, I'm going to create the position where my latitude and longitude is just equal to 0. And by default, when I don't give this, the values for latitude and longitude, automatically I'm going to use them from the default values. Okay? I think it's good. And, for example, I can use, I'm going to move, sorry. Here, we have my conference class, where I have some attendees, a list of attendees. I can use the field function where I'm going to define just a default factory attribute with this default, with this function. And this function will execute will create a list of attendees, just one. Why we use that? Just because when you will execute your Python code, automatically, if you use just the default attendees and not the field, you will get only one instance, and you will have a problem with that. If you prefer, and it's my case, I'm going to use just a field, and when I'm going to create the conference object, one instance of the conference class, I will get a new instance of my list. Okay? In this example, you can use an external file or whatever. For the method and properties, of course, because we have the data class, it's just a class. We can extend it. We can add the full name. Full name is just here a property, but if you remove the decorator, it's just a function, a method. In this case, you can use it and extend your data classes. Of course, we can use the configuration for the data classes. By default, we have an init, a method, the rep method, and the equal method. If you want to make some comparison, you need to add the other. By default, it's just false. Because in simple structure, you don't need to use order, because you will execute for a string. You can compare a string. But if you have a complex structure, order is better. Okay? For the frozen, you can use, if you like the frozen set or frozen class, you can use frozen. It's true. Example. I have my person, and I would like to instantiate this one, just here. But I don't want to change my age. In the reality, I have 38, not 27. I'm not very young. For the rest, we can use the other. With the other, we will override the minus operator, the less operator. Of course, because it's a class, we can use the inheritance. Here, I'm going to define person, like a class, and user, I'm going to inherit from person. And here, in the constructor of person, I will specify the two attributes, first name and last name. And for the rest, for the user, I will specify the two first attributes from person, and for the two last, it's just the username and the password. Okay? I think it's good for Python. And because we use the type heighting, we can specify, we can check the type with MyPy. Do you like this feature? Sure? Congratulations for Steve and the core developers. Not for me, I'm just a contributor. But it's a very good job, because when you try to learn that to the newbies, the trainees in the Python training, they prefer that instead of a very big class. Okay? And of course, if you like to use with, for example, I'm going to use the data class for a web service. And I have my structure, and I would like to return just a dict, and this dict will be used with JSON. Just use the hasDict function. It's just a small helper. Okay? So, conclusion. We can replace the name tuple, the tuples, and the simple class by the data classes. We can use the type annotation, welcome MyPy and the rest of the tools chain. We can accept the default values. About the default values. With the name tuples, there was an introduction of default. When you create a name tuple, you have the keyword default in Python 3.7, where you can define some default values. But now, with the data classes, I prefer to use that. Of course, you can have some logics, business logic with the data class. Just use the methods and the properties, and you can override them with the inheritance. And you have some helpers. So, for me, it's just a success. Sorry. Like this baby. We can see him in a lot of conference. I don't know why. Yes, boy. Okay, so for the next, this PEP about getter and dir. Do you like to use a deprecated function? Deprecated function? No? Okay. Usually, when we want to deprecate a function, just an example. I'm going to in this direction. Sorry for the camera. Here, I'm a developer. I would like to import this library. Okay? But when I execute my code, I'm going to receive this deprecation warning. That's very boring for me, because I don't want to develop a new line for each function. Example, I have the two functions, and I would like to deprecate them. Usually, we use just warn from the warnings module. Okay? For this example, we have two functions. It's not very difficult. Okay, I'm going to copy and paste the result. But if you have 100 functions and you would like to deprecate them, there's another feature. You could use getat, just here, and check if the name is the name used by the function. The name is in the deprecated names, just a dictionary here, or a list, or a set, and you can generate a warning. Previous, before, no. If you have 100 functions, I prefer this method. And of course, you can return from the globals, you can return the right name, the right function. And if you don't want, you can execute just an attribute error. Okay? So, next point. It's just, yes, here. Oh no, sorry, the bad button. We have the dir method. It's a magic method. And this one will be used for when you use the dir function in the REPL or in Python. And this one will return just a list of your methods in the attributes in the module. But you can override this behavior and just, in this case, just try to sort your functions by name if you prefer, or you can use a decorator on your function and sort them by priority, for example. So, just an no. We have the postpone evaluation of annotation. Example. With Python 3.6, this code can compile Do you know the interpreter of Python? Who knows the interpreter of Python? Okay. Can you compile this code? Why?
Because the definition of nodes is not recursive.
Yes. Thank you. There's a problem with this code, with Python 3.6. We try to define, we try to use node just here. But there is a problem, because we try to create node on the compile time and the runtime. And there is a problem with that, because node does not exist. For that, there's the exception. For that, there's a workaround. The workaround is just, okay, I'm going to use a string instead of the class. And I don't like that. Okay? I prefer to use this previous notation. But for that, there's a problem with Python 3.6 and Python 3.5, of course. 2.7 is not the case. For that, we have introduced the feature, and a new module in the feature, just import annotation. And from that, you can use just left is equal to a node. Okay? And, of course, you can start with the data class to define your node like that. Just with the type writing and the data class, you have a very small structure to represent a tree. Okay? Not very difficult. So, the time function with nanosecond resolution. This function has been developed by Victor Steiner, because when he wanted to make a lot of benchmark of Python, he has seen a lot of problems. For example, for the current function, time.time, we have a limitation. Currently, we are limited to 64 bits, and we are limited with the representation of the float format. In this case, it's just I, just in French, IEE 754. That's very difficult for me, sorry. So 754 format. And we have a limitation because we are limited to 104 days. Okay, and so we can have some problem. We have introduced some function for the scientist. If you prefer to use the nanosecond resolution, you can use just clock gate times ns for the nanosecond resolution, and the rest you have the suffix, just ns. Example, for the monotonic, we have the result in float, and now you can get the resolution with the nanosecond with a big integer. If you prefer this one, yeah, that's good. Who used the nanosecond resolution here? Just you? 2? Oh, great. It's a feature for you. Sorry. So, the deprecation warning in the main function. Who used Django? Do you execute your test? Yeah? Sometime when you execute your test. No, Nicholas, you don't execute your test. I don't want to work with you, sorry. So, sorry. The best practice, use the CI and the test, of course. No, really. And try to use a new version of Django, for example. Okay, Small example. When you develop with Django or with another feature, another framework, sometimes you can have a lot of deprecation warning because there is a migration to a new function. For example, if you want to use Python 3.8, the collection.abc is preferred or just deprecated. Steve? You don't remember? That's the same case for me. So, and when you will execute the code, for example, here, just an example with the documentation of Python, okay? Because I like to contribute to Python. And with Python 3.6, that was the default version in the CI on Travis, we use Python 3.6. And when we execute the documentation, the compilation step, we don't have any problem. But if we try with Python 3.7, we have a lot of deprecation warning. By default, in Python 3.7, you will get this message, deprecation warning. It's just a very big red light for you and for your developments. By default, we show the deprecation warnings. So, yeah. That was a private joke with Victor. Normally, I have to do that. I like move it. But no. Okay, context variables. Oh, sorry. Who use async.io or IHTTP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Okay, how do you store a variable between your coroutines? No? What? Yeah, for example. In fact, there is a problem with the current concept of async.io because we use the TLS. So we don't use the TLS, sorry. For the synchronous programming, you will use the TLS, for example, with Flask or Django. But Flask is the best choice because you have the G variable or the session variable. And this one, we use the TLS from Wirtel and Python. And for each request, it will store the variables in the TLS. That's not really, it's not a very good practice. It's a good practice for the synchronous programming, but not for the asynchronous programming, because you have only one thread, and you will receive a lot of requests in the same time. And because there is this limitation with the TLS, we have introduced the context var. For example, in this code, I'm going to define just a context var. This one will be associated to the default task, default context of the task. And when you will execute this handler for this request, automatically we will store the new value in the context of the task of the coroutine. So in fact, you have the task, you have the coroutine, and we will add a context. And we can do that with just context vars. Okay? For the asynchronous programming, instead of using a variable in, for example, with async.io in the app attribute, you can just use this one. I think it can be useful for the asynchronous programming. For the PEP 540, we have detected a problem with Python and Docker, because in Docker we don't specify the encoding, and sometimes that can be really a very big problem. And sometimes on Windows we don't use UTF-8. On the command line of Python, you have the X attribute, the parameter, when you can specify UTF-8. If you use it, by default, it will override the get file system encoding and get preferred encoding, and will return UTF-8 by default. You can force the encoding of Python. Okay? That can be useful on Windows and in Docker. And by default, it's just disabled. If you don't specify it, we won't want to use it. Except that if you have LC all is equal to POSIX or C. Okay? In my case, it's just French. Yeah, I don't use it. But if you prefer to use it, just use LCS equal to POSIX or C. The Python documentation translation. I come from Belgium. I can speak Dutch, a little bit in German, French, Italian, and I try in English. Okay? But you, where do you come from? Do you from France? No, Italy? Brazil? Okay. With this PEP, you can start to translate your favorite documentation, in fact, Python, in your favorite language, mother language. For example, we have the translation in French, in Japanese, in Korean. And it's not a joke, it's official. If you want to learn for a kid, for example, we have the Coder Dojo with a Raspberry Pi. And, you know, a kid cannot speak English. In Belgium, they try to speak French and SMS message, this autograph. But they have a problem because Python is just in English, the main language, yeah. And because we started to translate in French, we have a lot of kids now. They try to use Raspberry Pi and with MicroPython, and they start to use Python for them. Instead in France, there's a French language, WinDev. Do you know WinDev? No? WinDev is just a language where the keywords are in French. No. Sorry. Okay. You can start the German, the German translation, the Polish, the Spanish, and the Ukrainian. Why those languages? Because I was in PyCon Germany, PyCon Poland, PyCon Spain, and PyCon Ukraine. And I try to improve that. If you want to help me, you can come. Brazilian is Spanish, yeah? Or Brazilian? Portuguese. Let's go. We can start. I can help you for the translation. And there is an infrastructure for that. And of course, if you want to contribute to the documentation, the official documentation, you can just create a pull request on GitHub and sign the CLA. So, that was in the PEP, and now it's not in the PEP. Firstly, the import lib resource. Would like to use PKG resource? Just you? Whoa, and me. Okay. Resources. It's used when you want to load a binary artifact from your packages. For example, you have a test, and this test will use a binary external file. You can use import lib resources. So the interest of this library is just equal in feature to PKG resource, but we just dropped the bad things of PKG resource. And about the performance, it's just better. Okay? And of course, with this library, we can read the artifact from the file system, of course, or from a zip file, or HTTP, Amazon, or whatever. Just, yeah. Example, I have my package. And I would like to read this file, message.eml, just there. Okay? Usually, without import lib, I should use this code. Passlib, yes. I prefer to use passlib because with Python 3.7 and 3.6, I don't know, but I see a lot of os.pass. For me, I prefer to use the new feature. So we have passlib.pass, parent, and dir name / test / data / message.eml, and just read the bytes without this library. With the library, just resources.read binary, and you give the pass. Okay? In the past, there is 5 or 6 years ago, when you wanted to read the binary files with PKG resource, that was really buggy, boring, and what you want. But no, I prefer this feature. Okay? And of course, you can use a context manager. It's just an example with the context manager. If you don't like to use a context manager, don't use it. Okay? Because the last week I received a message, hey, but in your talk, you explain with the context manager. Do you use the context manager in this case? Oh, no. But you can use it. Sometimes. Okay. And of course, if you don't like the notation with the string, you can use the notation with your object. Just that. Okay? So, that was unofficial with Python 3.6, but now with Python 3.7, the orders, the dict will keep the orders. Example. We have a dict. We have the attribute, name, location, and year. PyCon, wonderful country, Hertz. Yes, because... so, that's two weeks ago, I was in PyCon Germany, just before in PyCon France, and just before Python Sebastian, and EuroPython, etc. And for each conference, I need to change this example. Okay? But because I like to go to the PyCons, I prefer to use a wonderful country and Hertz. That's just for the future. But for the future, that will be what's new in Python 3.8. Okay. So, but we can see that we keep the order. Name is the first attribute, location the second, and year the third. We keep the attribute. And there is a side effect with that. If you use a CarWorks in Python, with the new version of Python, you will keep the order of the attributes. Just that. So, from the from import. When we use the from import, sometimes we can have an exception. For example, in this case, we try to import demo from intertools, and we get this exception. Okay, that's fine. It's a very small example, but if you have 100,000 lines of code, and you get this exception, that's very boring to debug it. Now we have another message. We cannot import demo from intertools because I use demo everywhere, because I'm a bad developer or just a funny developer, and I like to use my demo function everywhere. And here, I will get this exception with, no, you cannot import demo from intertools. Please, could you fix it? Could you fix your code? Yeah, of course. So, async and await. Async and await was introduced in Python 3.5. Yeah? With Python 3.7, you will get an exception, syntax error. Please, if you move to Python 3.7, just remove async from your dictionary of variables and use another word. Okay? Async and await, you will get an exception. Just that. Async IO improvements. Before, when I wanted to execute just this code, with async IO, I had need to define an event loop, just run until the complete, when the function is just finished, and close my loop. Okay? And because in the documentation, before 3.7, the documentation was more a reference and not a tutorial, that was really boring. And really, for me, I like to use Google, and sometimes I get this snippet from internet. And now, I can use just that, async.io.run. Of course, we have some improvements. Firstly, async.io will use a context var, of course. We have the create task function. It's just a shortcut to the loop.create task. We can set a TLS connection. We can get the current task. Current task is used by context vars. We can get all the tasks, and we can use the sock send file. Sock send file is just a syscall in the kernel. When you want to send a message, a file, instead of try to copy the file and send it to the customer, you can use lock send file, and this one will use the syscall from the kernel. That's very good, because about the performance is just the best thing. For the rest, improvement about the performance. Yeah, the get event loop has been improved 15 times, just because we dropped the Python code and use the Python code, or just the C code, the C API. For the feature, the getter and the sleep, we can see we have some improvements. For the gifts for the developers, for me, for example, or you, of course. If you want to know the time of your import, you can use X import time. And you will see just the time for the import. like that. If you like to debug with Python, it's another feature of Victor. You have dev. This one will use the development mode, additional routine check. For example, the memory, the trust malloc, and the fault handler, and the debugging session, the debugging mode for async IO. About the performance. Firstly, but yes, of course, Python 3.7 is better than Python 2 and better than Python 3.6. And I use it in production. And of course, we have a lot of improvement and bug fixes. Yes, you can use the last version, Python 3.7.1, released there is 2 weeks ago. Oh, between less than 1 month. And of course, if you have a question, I love Python 3.7. I think it's a very great vintage for me because I use it. I just drop it Python 3.6 from my stack. I use this one, and sometimes 3.8. But I have some bugs with the libraries, the external library. And of course, if you have any question, I can try to answer.
Before, when you showed the data classes, there was the fill function, which was used to define the default value of class fields. Mm-hmm. And could that be used also to define function parameter? That was to avoid the problem of the default value being defined just once and being modified, as far as I understand. And can that be used even for default function parameter?
I don't know. Firstly, I didn't understand your question. It's my fault. I'm not a native speaker, but if you can repeat later, just there.
Okay.
To be sure to understand.
Okay.
I'm very sorry. It's my fault. Not yours. And, on the left.
Yep. Thank you. Have any of those features not been backported to 2.7?
What?
Have any of those features not been backported to Python 2? They're all available in Python 2?
No.
None of them are?
Python 2 is just dead. Just dead.
All right, all right.
And there is a reason for that. Firstly, Python 2 is dead, But before, maybe there is 2 or 3 years ago, there was a very big switch between Python 2, hesitation between Python 2 and Python 3, because the third libraries, the external libraries, don't want to support Python 3. No, it's just the case. 95% of the libraries use Python 3. And Python 2 is just dead. The first January of 2020, we stopped the support. We'll stop the contribution to Python 2. That's the case for Steve and for the rest of the core developers. Except at Red Hat. Because they have a very big support for that. No, a question from a core developer.
Yep. I have answers, actually. So just to add to some of those answers for your question, that field can only actually be used with data classes. You can't use that anywhere else apart from inside a data class. So that won't let you have the value factory. And the backport of import lib resources is available on Python 2. So you can pip install import lib _ resources to get that module. But nothing else is available on Python 2.
Thank you. Another question? I'm going to explain the new feature for Python 4.
There was this from future import annotations so that you could support circular references in the node example.
This one?
No, for the type annotations where you had circular references to node. You had defined a class called node, and then it had parameter arguments.
Yeah. Sorry. I know. Where are you? Oh, yeah. It's not in the data class. Sorry. No. Yes, this one.
Okay. So yeah, I was just wondering why it's from future. Is it like is it a temporary feature, or is it just a pun because it's
no, it's not a temporary feature. Before, there was this problem. We used a string instead of the class. And normally, that will be accepted in Python 3.8 or 3.9? I don't know.
3.9, I think it'll be on by default.
Yeah, 9. No, not Python 9, Python 3.9.
Yeah. Okay, so in 3.9, this will be the default way.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would other question about context vars. So are they only for async I/O, or do they also replace thread.local?
Not for async I/O only. You can use it for another example. But in this case, the main problem was for async I/O.
Okay. But they will also work in threading.
You can use it without async I/O. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
And welcome. Another question? Okay.
Great. Thank you very much,
In
Stephane.
time.
That was fantastic. Thank you.